I found this story where it shouldn't have been, and once you hear it, it doesn't let go. How the morgue elevator opened on a floor that shouldn't exist. The elevator was only supposed to go down one level, but the moment the doors shut with me and the body inside, I knew something had gone wrong. I had worked enough hospital night shifts to hate the sound of service wheels on tile and the cold rubber smell of a covered gurney. But none of that bothered me as much as the tag on the body bag that night. There was no name on it, no age, no department, just a room number written in black marker, B19. The problem was, our hospital didn't have a B19. We had a basement lab, a storage level, and the morgue below that, but no patient floor with B rooms. I remember asking the orderly about it while we rolled the gurney into the service elevator just before dawn. He barely looked at the tag. Probably an old code, he muttered. Then his radio crackled, and he stepped back out of the elevator to answer it, holding up one finger like he'd be right back. The doors slid shut before he could stop them, leaving me alone with the body as the elevator started moving. At first, I thought it was just taking me to the morgue without him. I even reached for the open button, ready to wait for the doors to reopen. But instead of stopping at the basement, the elevator kept descending. The number display above the door changed from B1 to M, then went blank completely. No alarm, no jerk in the cables, just a smooth, steady drop into somewhere the building shouldn't have had. I pressed every button on the panel. Nothing lit up. That was when I heard the first sound from the gurney behind me. Not movement exactly, just a faint shift of weight, like the wheels had rolled half an inch on their own. I turned around slowly. The body bag was still zipped shut. The tag still hung from the handle, but the plastic over the face area had sunk slightly inward, as if whatever was inside had just taken the smallest breath. The elevator stopped with a soft shudder. The doors opened onto a corridor I had never seen before. It looked like part of the hospital, but older, much older. The walls were tiled halfway up in a yellowed cream color, and the overhead lights glowed weakly behind metal cages. The floor was polished linoleum, cracked in long dark veins. On either side of the corridor were patient room doors, all painted the same dull green, all standing open just enough to show darkness inside. Somewhere far down the hall, a heart monitor beeped in a slow, patient rhythm. I should have stayed inside the elevator. I know that, but I had that awful feeling that if the doors closed again, they might never open anywhere I recognized. So I grabbed the gurney and pulled it with me into the corridor, thinking I'd find a staircase, a nurse's station, any sign of the real hospital. The air smelled wrong: bleach, old metal, and something sweet underneath it, the kind of smell flowers get when they've started to rot in a vase. Halfway down the hall, I saw the first chart clipped outside a room. The paper was yellow with age. The name line was blank. The room number at the top read B19. I stopped so hard the gurney wheels squealed. Then, from inside the room, I heard someone whisper, "You're late." It was a woman's voice, tired and dry, like she had been calling for a very long time. I looked through the narrow gap in the door and saw a bed in the dark, the outline of a patient propped against the pillows, and a second empty bed beside it with the sheets turned down as if waiting for another admission. My throat went tight. I backed away and nearly hit the gurney. That was when I noticed the body bag zipper had come down 3 inches. I hadn't touched it. I know I hadn't. Through the opening, I could see hospital gown fabric and a pale hand resting against the plastic from the inside. Then the monitor farther down the corridor started going faster. Beep, beep, beep. Doors along the hall began opening a little wider one by one, not swinging open fast, just inching outward together, like the whole floor had heard me arrive. From the rooms came small sounds: wheels creaking, oxygen hissing, someone coughing behind a wall where no one should have been alive enough to cough. I grabbed the gurney and started backing toward the elevator, but the farther I pulled, the heavier it felt, as if the body on it was gaining weight with every step. Then a voice behind me, close now, whispered, "B19 was waiting for you too." I turned. The pale hand was no longer inside the bag. It was hanging over the edge of the gurney. The zipper was halfway open. I ran. I left the gurney, the body, everything. I sprinted back to the elevator and slammed my fist against the button until the doors finally opened. As they started to close again, I looked down the corridor one last time and saw figures standing in the room doorways. Patients in gowns, four poles beside them, faces washed pale under the weak lights, all of them staring toward me like they were waiting for transport. The elevator rose so fast my knees almost gave out. When the doors opened again, I was back on the morgue level, under the bright hospital lights, with the orderly standing outside looking. Annoyed more than worried, he asked where the body was. I told him there had never been a morgue stop, told him the elevator had gone somewhere else, told him the floor below the basement had rooms and patients and one of them had my number. He just stared at me, then held up the transport sheet I'd dropped earlier. "What body?" he asked. The sheet in his hand was blank. No tag number, no room, no patient. I never took that elevator again. I started using the public lifts, even when it meant going the long way around. But 2 nights later, right before shift change, I found a fresh transport tag clipped to my locker handle. No name, no age, no department, just one room number written in black marker. B19, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to Bloody Chapter for more stories that follow you down long after the elevator doors close. How I kept getting calls from a room that had already been emptied. The call light for room 214 turned on at exactly 1:14 a.m., 3 hours after the patient inside had died, and the first thing I thought was that somebody on the cleaning crew had brushed against the button by mistake. I was wrong. I knew I was wrong. The second I looked down the hallway and saw the room door standing half open, and that soft red light pulsing above the frame like someone inside was calmly asking not to be forgotten. I'm Mr. D, and you are listening to Mr. D Stories. Most of you listening to my stories are not subscribed yet, so please like and subscribe to hear more from Bloody Chapter, because I used to think hospitals were the safest place in the world. Bright lights, cameras, locked medicine rooms, nurses everywhere. But on the night shift, after enough doors close and enough families go home, a hospital stops feeling like a place that saves people. It starts feeling like a place that keeps what it can't let go. I was working patient transport that week, which meant I moved people from rooms to scans, scans to recovery, recovery to discharge, and sometimes to the morgue when nobody else wanted to do it. The man in 214 had passed just after 10, congestive failure, quiet ending, no drama. By midnight, the nurse had charted him. Housekeeping had changed the sheets. The monitor had been unplugged, and the room was supposed to be ready for the next admission by morning. Empty, clean, finished. So when the call light came on, I walked down there mostly annoyed, expecting to clear some stupid electrical glitch and get back to my coffee before it went cold. But the moment I stepped into the doorway, I felt something was wrong. The room was spotless, just like it should have been, except the bathroom light was on. I knew it hadn't been on earlier because I had helped transport the body out of that room myself, and I remembered the nurse switching every light off before we left. I stood there for a second, staring at the yellow glow under the bathroom door, telling myself maybe housekeeping had come back in, maybe I had remembered wrong. Then I noticed the plastic cup on the bedside tray. It was half full of water. That cup had been empty when I left. I went inside slowly and said, "Hello," even though I already felt stupid saying it to an empty room. No answer. The bathroom door was cracked open, just enough for the light to spill through. I pushed it wider. Nobody inside. Sink dry. Mirror clean. Toilet lid down. Nothing. I turned the bathroom light off, dumped the water from the cup into the sink, and headed back to the station. 10 minutes later, the call light for 214 came on again. This time the nurse at the desk looked up and frowned. "Didn't they clear that room?" she asked. I told her they had. She shrugged and said old rooms acted up sometimes, faulty wiring, moisture in the panel. "Just reset it," she said, but she didn't look at me when she said it. She looked past me toward the hallway, like she didn't want to see the room herself. When I got there, the door that I was sure I had pulled almost shut was wide open. The bathroom light was back on, and the curtain beside the bed had been pulled halfway closed, as if someone wanted privacy. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Hospitals are full of little sounds people learn to ignore. Ventilation, wheels, alarms, intercom static, but that room had a silence to it that felt heavier than sound. Like it was listening. I crossed to the wall, reset the call button, and turned to leave when the television clicked on by itself. Not a channel, just black and white static buzzing low in the dark room. I swear I nearly ran. Instead, I grabbed the remote from the tray, shut the TV off, and backed into the hallway without taking my eyes off the bed. At 2:14 a.m., the light came on a third time. Same exact minute past the hour. By then even the nurse looked uneasy. She asked me, "Did the family take all his belongings?" I said yes. "Did you check the chart?" I asked her why. She hesitated, then said, "Because the intercom outside that room keeps making a sound." I followed her back down the hall, and we both heard it before we reached the door. A soft burst of static from the wall speaker mounted beside 214. Then a flat computerized voice said, "Discharge pending. Mercer, Allen." Discharge pending. Mercer, Allen. That was the dead man's name. I know because I had seen it on the transport paperwork. The nurse beside me went pale. She whispered, "He was never discharged." Then she caught herself and laughed the kind of laugh people use when they're trying to step back from the edge of something they don't understand. She muttered something about a charting delay and walked off faster than she needed to. She left me standing there alone with the light still blinking over the door. This time when I entered the room, the monitor was on. That should have been impossible. The machine had been unplugged and rolled back against the wall after midnight. Now it sat beside the bed again, screen glowing green in the dark, tracing a slow, steady rhythm over a line that should have been flat forever. Beep, pause, beep, pause. Not a normal heart rate, too slow, too deliberate. On the bedside table, next to the refilled cup of water, sat the folded discharge papers. I hadn't seen those before. My hands were shaking when I picked them up. The top page had Alan Mercer's name, room number, and time of death, but across the signature line, where the patient was supposed to acknowledge release, someone had written in shaky pen, "Still waiting." I dropped the papers and backed toward the door. That's when the bathroom light clicked off behind me. I froze. Then the sink faucet turned on. A thin stream of water hit porcelain in the dark while the monitor beside the bed kept up its slow, impossible beeping. I told myself to run. I should have run, but I looked at the bed one last time, and I wish I hadn't, because the sheets weren't flat anymore. There was a shape beneath them. Now, not a person sitting up, not a body moving. Just the unmistakable outline of someone lying exactly where we had left the patient before transport, as if the room had remade him from memory and was waiting for someone to sign the final paper. The call light flashed once more. Then, from the speaker outside the room, came the same cold voice, louder this time, "Transport 4. Room 214. I don't remember stepping back into the hallway. I only remember the nurse at the far desk looking up at me, seeing my face, and standing so fast her chair rolled backward into the wall. I told her not to go in there. She asked me what I saw. Before I could answer, the call light above 214 stopped blinking and went dark. The monitor went silent, the intercom cut off, and the room settled into the kind of stillness it should have had all along. Security. Checked it 20 minutes later. Clean bed, TV off, bathroom dark, no water in the cup, no discharge papers on the tray, nothing. Just an empty room waiting for the next patient. They told me I was overtired, that I'd been around too many deaths that week. Maybe they even believed that. But the next night, when I came in for shift change, I checked the assignment board by habit. Room 214 had a new patient coming up from the beneath the typed room number. Someone had written a note in red pen for transport staff only. It said, "Do not leave him alone if the call light comes on." How I found out the sealed wing was still taking patients the first time I saw E17 printed on the medication chart. I thought it had to be a typo. Everyone on the night shift knew the East Wing had been sealed for years. The doors had chains on them, the lights were always off, and the elevators were not supposed to stop there anymore. During orientation, one of the older nurses had laughed and told me, if an elevator opens on East, close it and pretend it didn't. I thought she was joking. At 1:32 a.m., I was standing behind the night desk sorting charts. A nurse from surgical recovery hurried over, pressed a paper into my hand and said, "Can you take this to E17? The patient's overdue." I looked down automatically, expecting some room on the 5th floor, but there it was in black ink. East Wing, room E17. I looked back up and said, "East Wing's closed." She blinked at me like I had said something stupid. "No, it isn't," she replied. "They reopened it last week." Then she turned and walked off before I could ask another question. That should have settled it, except the two nurses sitting at the desk nearby had heard her. When I asked them if East had reopened, one of them actually went pale. The other just shook her head and said, very quietly, "No one reopens East." I wish I had listened to her. Instead, I told myself this was exactly how hospital rumors got started. One unit closes, staffing changes, departments move around, and night workers turn ordinary confusion into ghost stories. So I took the chart and walked to the old East corridor. The farther I went, the quieter the hospital became. You could still hear distant intercom pages and the soft beeping of monitors from the active floors behind me, but it all felt farther away with every step, like the building itself was lowering its voice. The double doors. 2 East were still there at the end of the hall, heavy and gray, with a faded red sign reading authorized personnel only bolted between them. The chains were gone. That was the first thing that stopped me. The second was the light. A thin strip of pale fluorescent light showed beneath the doors, even though I had passed that same hallway earlier in the shift and could have sworn it was dark. I pushed one of the doors open, and it swung inward without resistance. The smell hit me first, not rot, not mold, just that strong hospital mix of antiseptic, old dust, and overheated ventilation, like a place scrubbed clean too many times without ever being used. The corridor beyond looked wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It was definitely part of the hospital, but older than the rest. With yellowed ceiling panels, narrow patient room windows, and wall paint in a shade of green I had only seen in old photographs from decades ago. Some of the overhead lights worked, others flickered in uneven pulses, leaving parts of the hall bright and others half-shadowed, and from somewhere farther down I could hear wheels rolling. Slowly across tile, I checked the chart again. Patient, Evelyn Ward, room E17, medication due, 1:30 a.m. physician, Dr. Levin. I stopped at the last line. Dr. Levin had a portrait in the main lobby downstairs. He had been dead for at least 12 years. I stood there staring at the page until the sound of rolling wheels stopped somewhere ahead of me. Then, from one of the rooms on the left, a call light chimed, not loud, just one soft, polite tone, as if someone inside had pressed the button and was waiting patiently for help. E17 was near the end of the corridor. The room door stood half open. I could see a bed inside, a heart monitor glowing faint green, and the outline of someone sitting upright against the pillows. I should have turned around then. I should have walked straight back to the desk, handed the chart to whoever gave it to me, and refused to go near that wing again. But hospitals train you to answer doors, alarms, and patients before fear gets a vote. So I knocked once and stepped in. The woman in the bed looked impossibly thin, her skin pale against the blanket, her gray hair smoothed back from a narrow face that seemed too sharp for the dim light. She turned toward me slowly, like even that small movement took effort. The heart monitor beside her was working, but the rhythm was strangely steady, almost too perfect, and the oxygen line beneath her nose wasn't connected to any tank. On the tray table sat a water pitcher, a sealed cup, and a hospital wristband that had been cut off and placed neatly beside the cup. I moved closer and saw the date printed on the band. It was 8 years old. The name matched the chart in my hand, Evelyn Ward. She watched me with eyes that seemed clearer than they should have been. "You're late," she said. Her voice was dry but calm, like she had been waiting through much longer delays than mine. I looked down at the medication cup on the chart, then back at her, and asked the only thing I could think of, "How long have you been here?" For a second, she didn't answer. Then she looked past me, toward the open door, and whispered, since they locked the wing. Something moved in the hallway outside. A shadow passed the room window in the door, followed by the slow squeak of wheels again, like a cart being pushed by someone in no hurry at all. I backed toward the doorway and nearly collided with a metal floor stand that hadn't been there when I walked in. My pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, but even to me the words sounded useless. The woman gave me a tired little smile. "They all say that on the first night." Then she lifted one hand and pointed to the chart. "Check the signatures." My fingers felt numb as I opened it again. Every page in the file had staff initials at the bottom: medication given, vitals checked, patient observed. The signatures stretched back for years. Different pen colors, different handwriting, different dates. But every one of them was on overnight shifts between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock a.m. The most recent signature had been written that night, less than 20 minutes earlier. It wasn't mine. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, soft and measured. I turned just as a nurse passed the open doorway. She wore an outdated uniform dress instead of scrubs, pale blue with white trim, the kind you only saw in old training photos. She didn't look at me as she moved past. She kept pushing a medicine cart toward the next room like I wasn't even there. I followed her with my eyes until I noticed the room numbers across the hall, E15, E16, then a blank space where E17 should have reflected in the opposite window. For one impossible second, it looked like room E17 existed on its own, with no matching room across from it, as if the hallway had bent around it. That was enough. I turned and ran. I didn't care how stupid I looked, didn't care what anyone said afterward. I just ran back down the corridor, through the open doors, and into the bright, active part of the hospital where the sounds of normal machines and real voices hit me so hard I almost dropped to my knees. When I reached the nurse's desk, the woman who had given me the chart was gone. The two nurses sitting there looked up at my face and said nothing at first. Then one of them quietly asked, "Did you go inside?" I tried to answer, but before I could, the old elevator at the end of the hall gave a soft ding. All three of us turned. The doors slid open for a moment, revealing only darkness inside. then closed again without anyone stepping out. When I looked down at the chart still clutched in my hand, it was blank. No patient name, no room number, no physician, just one line written across the center of the page in thin, careful handwriting I hadn't seen before. Night staff only. The next morning, I came in early and asked the day supervisor about East Wing. She told me it had been permanently closed after a flood and asbestos damage years ago, and that no patients had been assigned there since. I asked her about Evelyn Ward. She checked the system, frowned, and said there was no active patient by that name. Then she paused and added, almost reluctantly, there was one. She died during evacuation when the wing shut down. I never took another chart after 1 o'clock a.m. without checking it twice. But once, about a week later, while passing the old corridor, I heard a call light chime behind the sealed doors, and over the intercom a voice said, "Medication overdue, room E17."